we will now turn to our last section of our meeting today, which is brief accounts. And since we have less than 20 minutes left instead of 30 minutes, can I ask Tim and Gail and Destin, would you be willing each to keep your presentation to just 5 minutes instead of 10? Just, say a few words about your experiences in your in Northborough and Pepperell and Nantucket. Great, then let's do that. We have, as you know, we have 351, as we heard from Representative Garbely, 351 cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is a state with strong home rule, where the individual cities and towns have a big say in the daily and nightly life of their residents, and the laws and zoning code and so on that they can pass. And many of our IDA Massachusetts members spend a lot of time working with their local cities and towns to try to help them make the right decisions to protect the nighttime environment. And we have the great fortune of having three battle-hardened veterans in this long fight with us to tell us about their attempts to control light pollution locally. Gail Walker, could you please just give us a few words about your experiences in Nantucket, which have gone from 0 to 60 in such a short time? Gail.
Thanks, James. I'm happy to share my experiences. I'd actually prepared a PowerPoint, but since we're behind time, I'm just going to zip right through it and skip that. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is the extent of light pollution on Nantucket, because most people think it's not a problem there, or surprised it's a problem there, but it's been increasing there like it has been everywhere else. The satellite data shows it's increased at a rate of 2.4% each year since 2012. So that was very concerning to me. So I decided to found an island-wide effort to try to do something about it. I'd been working on light pollution for a while in the little village of Nantucket called Sconset, where my summer home is. I'd been working on light pollution issues for a couple years, but it was in this spring that I decided to broaden my efforts. And so I formed a citizen advocacy group, and inspired by the Northampton City Lights group that James heads up. I called it Nantucket Lights. It's the first and only organization on Nantucket now exclusively dedicated to raising awareness about light pollution and advocating for environmentally responsible outdoor lighting on the island. I head it up, but I'm guided by a diverse steering committee that has representatives from all over the island, some year-rounders and some seasonal residents. And this has been key to how we've been so positively received. On our committee, we're lucky enough to have 3 well-known scientists and thought leaders. So that's helping us. We have the director of astronomy for Mariah Mitchell, the director of research and education of the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, and the ecologist and field supervisor of the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. These are all very respected organizations, so it sort of gave us instant credibility. And even though we're only a few months old, we got the support by a number of other widely respected organizations on the island. So we got off to a really good start having those organizations supporting us. And my goal is to build an even larger coalition. And so eventually I hope to win the support of groups like the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, the Home Builders Association, and all the architects, realtors, and landscape designers on the island. So I'm working on getting their support. I wanted to take a moment to mention that we actually already have a pretty good dark sky ordinance that was adopted in 2005, but light pollution has increased despite that. And when I looked into this, I've kind of come to the conclusion that's in large part because hardly anybody knows about that ordinance. The town doesn't do much to advertise it or promote it, and enforcement is complaint-based, meaning the lighting enforcement officer doesn't investigate or take any enforcement action unless someone complains. So of course, if nobody knows about the what the restrictions are, they can't report violations, and also they may be violating it themselves just out of not being aware of what is not allowed. So one thing we're prioritizing is raising awareness about this bylaw and encouraging the town to do more to enforce it when a complaint is made. The bylaw isn't perfect though, and one of the things we're going to be doing is working on updating it and strengthening it in the days ahead. And I'm pretty optimistic we'll be able to get that through, probably not next year, but the year after, just the way town meeting works and the way bylaws are adopted on Nantucket. But so in the meantime, as part of our messaging, we're encouraging people to go beyond the bylaw and abide by the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting that were agreed on last year by IDA and IES. For example, we're encouraging people to stop using all up lighting and to turn all their outside lights off at night, even though that's not currently required by the bylaw. So to help raise awareness about the bylaw, as well as the 5 principles and light pollution generally, what we're doing, we're tackling this on several fronts. First, we have a very comprehensive website that includes not only information and useful links about light pollution generally, but it's very specific to Nantucket. And I think that's important because people want to know, they want to know what the information is relevant in their area. I spent a lot of time working on that website before we launched. In fact, I used it as a recruiting tool for the steering committee, which was turned out to be very useful. And I keep fine tuning it as I learn more. We also, right off the bat, were able to publish a what we call a guide to responsible outdoor lighting for residents. Again, it was very specific to Nantucket because we wanted to cover the bylaw and all the provisions that were relevant to residences, in addition to just general information about light pollution. And we were lucky that we had the support right away of the Nantucket Civic League, which is a coalition of 25 neighborhood associations on the island. And they agreed to cover the cost of the printing of this brochure because, we started out, we didn't have any money, and we're just now undertaking some fundraising. Anyway, and they're also helping us distribute it. Our main way of distributing it is through all the neighborhood associations. And that's going pretty well. And we also, I guess I should mention, we also frequently engage with the community on social media and have found that effective. Nantucket's year-round community is much smaller than the population during the summer when it just goes off the charts. But they have a year-round community group on Facebook with over 8,000 members, and that's how they all basically communicate. And even though I'm not a year-rounder, they allowed me to post on behalf of Nantucket Lights because it's a matter of interest. And so we have found that very effective in getting to that part of the community. And now that we've started a GoFundMe campaign and have some funds, we're going to start a bumper sticker campaign soon to sort of just try to bring about this culture change and make people more aware of the dark sky movement here. And we want to produce some more educational materials, do some public service announcements. A few other things I'll just mention quickly. We're doing, we're consulting some outdoor lighting experts about some non-residential locations that the Nantucket community has identified as the worst cases of light pollution other than residences. And if the complaints are confirmed to be valid, the plan is to facilitate a discussion between the expert and the property owner in question. We're also now partnering with a homeowners association who has requested us to help them explore upgrading their streetlights to be more dark sky friendly. They actually approached me, which means they heard our message and I've convinced them, and they want to lead by example. So this is a really a development I'm very excited about, and was totally unexpected that I would be kind of playing that role. On the streetlight front, we're also co-sponsoring, along with the Nantucket Energy Office, a WPI student project that is researching best practices for converting to LED streetlights, which is something Nantucket hasn't done yet, but is considering. And again, I was approached by that office to co-sponsor this because they cared about our opinion on this. And I think they think we are now the thought leader about this. So that report is due in mid-December, and I'm really hoping that's going to help provide a roadmap for Nantucket. Ultimately, we hope to be designated as an international dark sky community by IDA. I know that's a long process, 2 to 3 year process, and it's sort of, there's a lot we have to accomplish before we could get that designation, but I'm optimistic. I think we have some good momentum. I know there's broad support for this. That broad support came in large part because we got some really favorable media coverage. I kind of actually was stunned by how much coverage we got, and that has really helped. Kelly mentioned at the beginning that PBS Nova has contacted us and is going to be doing a story about us. I kind of think when any issue of Nantucket is thrown into the equation, it just attracts a lot of attention. So we're hoping to, help on that front, just because people know where Nantucket is, have heard about it, and I hope our efforts, help inspire others, and I hope it helps the rest of Massachusetts. So I've rushed through things, but there's probably no time for questions for me, but feel free to contact me through our website, nantucketlights.org, or you can always email me at nantucketlights@gmail.com.
Gail, speaking of leading by example, you have done it, and I hope everybody who you just heard, at least a dozen things that Gail has done. Just take one of them. Just start with one. If you're wondering what to do in your own community, just take one of the things Gail just mentioned and adopt it. All these things are adoptable, and I know that she'll make any of that material available. So thank you, Gail.
I'm happy to help anybody, and I will just add on top of that is when I started out about this, I knew nothing about light pollution. I just knew that I liked, I enjoyed looking at the stars, and that was being interfered with. And James and Tim and Kelly and the others at IDAMA have been so helpful, and that they have made it what I've done possible. And I just feel like they would be willing to help you too. So go for it.
True, Gail. All right, we have just 5 minutes to go. So Tim, I'm going to ask you to show, one slide, and Destin, one slide.
I don't have any slides, so I'll be really brief. So like many of you, I'm an astronomer, astrophotographer. I'm a professor of biochemistry at Worcester Polytechnic. So Gail, we're going to have to touch base on this project you got going with students, because I knew nothing about it, but I'd be happy to help in any way. I'm a trustee of the Southborough Open Land Foundation. And if you don't know Southborough, it's about midway between Boston and Worcester on the Route 9 corridor. Surprisingly rural. Southborough has a lot of ordinances that prevent chain stores and things like that. So Framingham's a bunch of restaurants and auto dealerships, and then you get to Southborough on 9, and it's a lot of open space. So I guess very long story short, 2-year process. We got a bylaw passed in Southborough that's pretty great for protection of dark skies. But the short of it is homework, networking, rinse and repeat is what we learned. Understanding your constituencies as best as you can. I started with the planning board. I gave a brief talk to the planning board on light pollution, really noticed that there were some conservation-minded folks on the planning board. Got a hold of some coalitions of the willing, so to speak, the Conservation Commission, different land trusts in town, started talking to business owners, started talking to homeowners and the Board of Selectmen. Long process, but I wrote a bylaw based on the model lighting ordinance along with the planning board. So I had the backing of the planning board. They were actually sponsoring the thing. I think what we ended up doing in the end that allowed it to pass was that we understood that from the small business community, which is a very strong constituency in Southborough, they wanted to make sure costs didn't go up for them. For the homeowners, they wanted to make sure that they were concerned that we were going to tell them what to do with the lights in their house, was their major concern. With the Board of Selectmen, it was how are we going to enforce it, and is this going to make the budget go up? And with the building department, it was how are we going to enforce it? Are we going to have enough people? And so we just had to understand those different constituencies, had to write a bylaw that was mindful of all of them and going in so that they were eyes wide open when we presented it. And we talked to National Grid. We have a tariff agreement for the streetlights, and getting their okay that, yeah, we've got 2,700 Kelvin streetlights that we can use in your tariff agreement. That took away a lot of the argument from the town. They kept dumping on National Grid and saying, well, we can't do this because we don't control the streetlights. Well, it turns out they just had to ask, and that was it. So last summer we got the bylaw passed with an incredible margin. It was nearly unanimous. And now enforcement is the key. So the hard work begins, right? So making sure that it's actually enforced and getting the building inspector out there to do their job. So that's my short story.
Thank you, Destin, so much, and especially for all that tremendous hard work over those 2 years. And now we can all see, as you say, go in with our eyes open and see what it takes to get it done. And now a somewhat more mixed report that also was a huge amount of work and also did everything right and had a slightly different outcome. Tim.
Hi, everyone. So I have 15 slides, so I'm going to talk really fast and blow through them, and you can play it back in the recording at really slow speeds later. So for those who don't know, and I don't blame you, I didn't know about Pepperell until I moved here either. We're a New Hampshire border town. The interesting thing as it relates to light pollution is we're at a transition zone past the Metro Boston area, where you go from not being able to see the Milky Way to still being able to see the Milky Way. Which sort of gives you a rough idea of how much light pollution we have. But that said, that's changing pretty rapidly, and it's the usual culprits that we're concerned about. And here's some examples of municipal lighting, but really, Pepperell is really a residential community that's growing, is a stagnant community with no commercial growth, really no major housing developments in the last decade, and a population growth rate of 0.4% at best. It's probably actually even less than that, given the new census. But it's also still it's sort of somewhat of an outlier in Massachusetts. A significant portion of our land is still used for agriculture. So and that's an important. So it's sort of this odd town where it's still valued to keep its rural character. 84% were surveyed recently, but yet our light pollution is growing at 6.8% a year, way beyond the national average. And at this rate, we're going to lose the Milky Way in 5 years. So this is what's changing, and you can see the Milky Way. This is the best shot I could get this summer. This is before the streetlight retrofit in our conservation area, fairly far away from any streetlights. That's the high school, in fact. That's about at least a mile away in the distance. That's illuminated all night long. Just to give you a little context, I'm not going to spend any time on this, but it's a very conservative town for Massachusetts, but it also has been in a sort of an abused environmentally town. There's been a lot of bad projects that have come to town, which did sort of initiate the interest in revisiting our bylaws, which are potentially some of the most lenient in the state. And so we formed this committee. I was asked to join to head up the lighting portion of it to generate new bylaws. And we were heartened by the first one we passed, the noise bylaw, which in my mind was actually much more intrusive to the average homeowner, and it passed 82%. So we said, hey, this is going to be a piece of cake. Well, not so fast. The bylaw that I wrote with the land committee, Light, Air, and Noise Bylaw Committee, was based off of the MLO, which was then before the MLO committee that I'm serving on with Nancy, started. John Barentine, who has just left the IDA, started working on a new model lighting ordinance, which I then worked on with him and adapted it to Massachusetts. And then I was able to use the town's legal team to review it and get it all up to snuff legally. And then we tried to pass it. And so what happened? We lost by 7 votes, but notice the amount of people that showed up. So remember, we're a town of 12,000, so you can imagine we have 8,000 to 10,000 registered voters, and 160 people showed up. The story behind why that is complicated. Part of that's COVID, part of that was intentional by the town to make sure it didn't pass. So we did a lot of things right. We did a lot of outreach. We had an official committee where we're very transparent and produced documents and produced a webpage, which still exists. And the committee still exists, although I'm no longer on it. I think the things it's sort of important for those of you that are going next to understand is and we've talked about this a lot in the MLO committee, is that you need to understand your town's appetite for regulations. We overestimated their appetite, and we also had really, really bad timing. Some of the key dates with the votes and the presentations happened to literally to the day coincide with major national events, which I'll leave unsaid what those were, but they were, a lot of bad misinformation campaigns combined with elections. Facebook is our primary source for news in town. We don't have a newspaper or a functional town website. So all of the information, which all of the town Facebook groups are also run by very anti-environmental groups. I'll leave it at that. And so that created a lot of misinformation. So the other problem was on our side, which was get out the vote. We did a very terrible job at getting out the vote. And that partially falls on me and the other committee members. But that was, I think, we should have been able to at least get, a couple hundred people that showed up for these other votes that stopped things like the gas pipeline and some of the other events that have happened in town. But there were real rumors that were spread throughout the town that, it was going to cost more, that it was going to lead to more bear attacks on humans, that there was going to be a secret lighting police created that would rip lights off of your doorway in the middle of the night, that we were particularly going to hurt Gold Star families. Gold Star families are veteran families, that somehow we would particularly focus on them. So there was all sorts of crazy things, and people believed it, and that's what happened. The biggest problem I will say that we ran into, and this is using all of this sort of idea that all lights should be fully shielded, is floodlights. And it's this light in particular that I think really killed us in the end. It's the ring light from Amazon. And oddly enough, the people who fought hardest for it were the people who were saying this is going to cost more. This is the most expensive floodlight you can buy. And this is what they were focused on, was that they didn't want to be disallowed from having this. We made a special rule to exempt just this light, and they didn't believe us. So here's the good news. What this allowed us to do, this was the big lever, this is the leverage, and in parallel to this, a company called Real-Term Energy, which is a multinational lighting design firm, which is really, I think, more of a lighting management company than design, came into town, and Massachusetts, being a state prone to subsidizing these streetlight programs, came in with this proposal. So this is the initial proposal. This is not really, they say they design lights, but they really just kind of come in with a cookie cutter proposal. And you notice that the wattages in these LEDs are ridiculously high. So the lumens are going to be also ridiculously high. They say 3,000K, but really in the first kickoff meeting, we found out that, as per usual, that the downtown lights were going to be 4,000. The problem with that, and particularly as it relates to wildlife, is our downtown, our main street, bisects the Nashua River, which is now a federally protected wild and scenic riverway, which is home to several endangered creatures, including the Blandings turtle. So we knew we had to cut down the amount of light, but also try to get that color temperature at least at a max at 3,000K. So here's the part where the bylaw, even though not passed, was extremely useful, because the town was concerned that if they went through this project, they didn't want to be outside the bylaw in case the bylaw passed parallel to this. So a couple of the key features that were really important to prevent this from going sideways was we put a 25-foot height limit on the lights. We put a 2,700K max CCT. We said that the bug ratings could not be above 1 for any of the values, and particularly the uplight needed to be 0. This project had to include smart controllers so that we could lower the dimming. And also, I know we use the word curfew a lot. I would urge you not to use the word curfew, and you can get into why another time, but it's not a good word, especially if your town is prone to being anti-regulation. So we changed that to after-hours use. So here's what comes back. So after the initial kickoff meeting, you get something like this, where they score a bunch of lighting, and here's the proposal. So the reason there's letters there is that's to correspond with the map I'm going to show you in a minute. So so a couple were eliminated immediately for just being, not really, they're costing too much, or maybe they weren't available, or maybe the photometrics were bad. So this is after meeting with them the initial time, giving them our demands. And I should mention that never once did the lighting firm complain about any of our demands. Never once did they say this is impossible, this is going to cost more, this is hard. this is going to cost your town more. None of that. This was, I think they actually enjoyed it, to be honest. So this is what we came up with. And this is the other part that I'm really proud of out of the bylaw that really, really worked well, which was it would have required any town project over, I believe, 10 lights and a certain amount of lumens to have public comment, which essentially triggered this public demonstration. And similar to what Nancy was showing, we set up different types of lights. Of course, being a small town, it's a little bit smaller scale. And then we had 52 people respond at night and give all sorts of responses. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'll focus mostly on the D and the E. So D is the old high pressure sodium. We threw that in as a control. And E was the light we ended up choosing. That's the 2200K fully shielded lighting we've been talking about. So these are just some of the survey responses, but clearly E was the favorite in terms of glare. People, and this is, by the way, I sort of could figure out which light was which, but I generally tried to keep that quiet. We tried to have people, even the people who are advocates at this point that we sort of turned on to this whole lighting game, we tried to not give them too much information. I would have been equally happy with F. F was a 2700K. It's called a Leotech Comfort View. It has a really nice distribution, but E won out. And notice for color or glare, the high pressure sodium actually did pretty well too. And then color, in terms of the color preference, again, E had E and D, which basically have the same color, high pressure sodium and the 2200K, were the clear favorites in terms of color. So what we ended up doing is the town then handed it over to Real Term. They did a full audit, and now I have GPS data for every single street light. And so I know exactly what the wattage and type was replaced with per LED, per specific model. And so we have a lot of data now that we're sifting through and trying to figure out, well, what did we actually do here? And the other thing we found is that because we did 1 week at full blast and another week at 50%, there was a clear preference for the dimming at 50%. And some felt that we could even dim further. So what that did was, you probably didn't catch this from the earlier slide. The original proposal was that we would save somewhere around 71%. We achieved on average 75% by doing it our way, by dimming. So even though that the 2200K has a lower efficacy, by dimming just that 50%. Now, this is a straight dimming. This is not a setback where it's at full blast at first and then dimming later. It's 50% all the time. And then the town has come back again and said, well, some people are saying we actually don't even need that much light. We might dim it even further by another 50%, so down to 25 at certain hours. So we've actually been able to achieve a much higher energy savings. People are happy. People had buy-in, and we got what we were looking for, because this is a sleepy town with a lot of sensitive environmental areas. And back to the notion that one of the things that besides agriculture and animals that people care about, people really care about human health. The AMA report was extremely useful in this. And the idea that we could squash the blue compared to the 4,000 by 74%, so that we only have 4% blue content, was very attractive to people. And these are spectrum taken by the manufacturer, by the way. And so this is what we ended up with, this grid of lighting that's well within our demands. Did not cost the town more. It actually saved the money, because this actually ended up being the cheapest offering out of those 5 LEDs, which people were blind to the cost when they chose their preference. They actually ended up choosing the most affordable lighting. And this is in front of my house a few weeks ago. This is what it looks like. It almost looks a little bit whiter compared to a high pressure sodium. They could probably still stand to improve the glare just a little bit. But I have to say it's coming home from the observatory at night where I have to pass through some pretty terrible lighting. It's nice to come home to something pleasant. So that's it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. My email is astrobrothers@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks to all 3 of those speakers just now from all of us for your hard work and for sharing those reports with us. Tim, if you'll stop sharing screen, we can all draw together again here. and just see if there are any burning questions for any of those three. I am so glad that we recorded this. I have so many, there are so many people that I want to share everything that I've heard in these last 2 hours. Every one of these talks had something really, really useful for various different projects that, you know, I'm involved in, and I'm sure the same goes for many of you. Any questions for Destin or Gail or Tim? All right, you know where to find us. It's time for us to wrap up. Go back to our Saturday lives. Thank you, everybody, for coming today, especially for our speakers, Annette and Nancy, and Tim and Gail and Destin. Thanks for all the hard work that you're doing, all of you outside of your normal life, to try to protect the night sky for animals and for humans and for the stars. Massachusetts is doing great things in this field, as you heard from Kelly at the beginning. I haven't mentioned, by the way, we have here a staff member of IDA, Lauren Scortafava, who's in Westfield, Mass. Hi, Lauren. Lauren, so happy to have you here with us in Massachusetts. Lauren provides us frequently with the direct line to IDA thinking, and we know that that Massachusetts is being watched in various ways because of our collective efforts. Thanks, everybody. It's been great seeing you all. A reminder to those of you who don't know, we have a monthly meeting on the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. by Zoom. And we hope to see you there, coming up on first Wednesday in December. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, James.